Am I the a-hole for insulting my father's girlfriend and telling her to get out of our lives? My mother was my world. I remember reading books, watching documentaries, and going on road trips with her. She baked my sister and I cookies whenever we were sick. Her and Dad would take us hiking every other week. I still miss her even now. When I was 11 years old, she passed away from a driving accident. It was the hardest year in my life, and it hasn't gotten easier. 2 years after she passed, my father started dating a woman named Nicole, and 4 years later, they're getting married. Nicole is younger than my father. After dating Nicole, I saw my father come back into his shell, but it turned into something else. Nicole brought adventure back into his life, but they often went on elaborate trips and frequent night outs. During all of this, I felt neglected. My father slowly stopped taking my sister and I on our weekly hikes. He started speaking less and less over calls, and he even once forgot my mother's birthday. After she came into our lives, I started losing my father. He just wasn't there anymore. One time, when my sister and I were home alone, she fell down the stairs and got a huge cut on her forehead. It was clear she needed stitches, so I called my father immediately. Nicole answered the phone, and I told her to give the phone to my father. She refused, saying he was busy, and before I could get another word in, she disconnected the call. I embarrassingly had to ask the neighbor to bring us to urgent care where my dad later met us. This woman at one point removed my mother's picture from the fire mantle to put up a picture of her and my dad from their trip to Washington. The thing that tipped me over was when she made my father forget about my mother's birthday. Every year, my sister and I go with our father to visit my mother on her birthday. It was an annual tradition even before Nicole entered our lives. Nicole and my father went on a trip to Florida and were supposed to be back 3 days before my mother's birthday. But, because this woman is motion sick, my father decided to break the drive back into small intervals to make it easier on her. Because of this, he ended up missing our annual trip. He didn't even call us. Not even a week later, my father has the nerve to tell us about an exciting surprise: Nicole is pregnant. I get angry and tell my father, "You need to knock her ass up when you can't even be here for us." I then look at Nicole and tell her she is a disgusting piece of trash and to get out of our lives. My father gets angry and yells at me to go up to my room. Later, my grandpa unexpectedly came over to pick me up. My father didn't text me shit. Even as I left, he wouldn't even look at me. It's been 2 days, and I'm still at my grandparents' home. I feel ashamed for saying what I said, yet I don't feel overwhelming regret. Am I the a-hole? Edit. When I saw how deep the cut was, I immediately called my dad. He was staying over at Nicole's place at the time. When I called, Nicole picked up. She said, "Hello." I said, "Sister's name is bleeding. Can you pass the phone to Dad?" She said, "Dad's name is busy. I can't." And, immediately afterwards, she disconnected the phone. I then left to go get my neighbor. Update: same post. I've decided to contact my maternal grandpa tomorrow. I'll let you know how it goes. Relevant comments. You didn't say your age, but I hope you can move out soon. I appreciate it. I'm 17, and I've spoken to school counselors too. No one is willing to help me. I've tried talking with my dad about how I feel way before my outburst, but it always ends with, "It happened years ago. It's time to move on." I don't even know what that means. My sister can't get help either, so I'm trying to peacefully exist for her. I am 17. My sister is 13. My dad is 44, and Nicole is 34. Has Nicole ever tried to connect? I ran out of characters in the original post, but that's the thing. Nicole never made any effort to talk to us apart from when we go out for family dinners, or when we are at parties. Even then, the conversations are always about her. My dad invited her on our hikes early in their relationship, but she didn't like being outside. And, over time, my dad stopped taking us hiking even when we asked him. Nicole does pottery from time to time, and I've invited her to my Art Honor Society events, but she always declined. We've made every effort to get to know her, but she only seems interested in talking with my dad. She doesn't understand we are a part of his life too. Grandparents and their role in this. I didn't touch on this before, but I am currently living with my paternal grandparents. They live the closer to us than my maternal side grandpa. I've tried talking to my paternal grandparents too, but it was also a very wishy-washy conversation. Not to say it didn't help at times, but it's clear that they were justifying my dad's actions at every chance rather than hearing me out. I don't want to live like this. I hate holding resentment, but I can't help it. I've asked my dad about therapy, but he doesn't believe in that type of support. This morning, I asked my paternal grandparents if I could spend Thanksgiving at my maternal grandpa's place, but they refused. And, that's another thing. I can't escape the situation or the bad feelings if I wanted to. Dad and Nicole will come over for Thanksgiving, and I'll have to sit there. Counseling. I want grief counseling mainly, but even just help working through my resentment towards my dad and Nicole is enough. I don't want to go to bed crying every other night. I don't want to feel hate. I just want to be mentally at peace. My dad doesn't believe in therapy or counseling. I don't know what made him hold those views, but it's made it harder for my sister and I to get help. I've secretly talked to school counselors, my paternal grandparents, my dad, my aunt, dad's sister, but it's never a productive conversation. The only person who has helped me the most was my maternal grandpa, but we are barely allowed to see him. I've calmly expressed how I felt to my dad on multiple occasions. You said you talked to your school counselor, what do they say? They can't point me towards a resource without my dad's consent. The conversations usually end with to continue to speak with my dad. I don't expect them to have a solution to every situation, but it would be nice to just be heard fully. I also have to censor a few details when I speak with them because they have sent a police officer to my house in the past. My dad was angry about that situation, and I don't want him to feel angry with me. As for therapy, my dad doesn't believe in therapy or counseling, so I'm limited with options. More on the police visit. When I spoke to the school counselor, I mentioned that when my dad and Nicole were traveling abroad, he left me and my sister home alone for 3 days and forgot to leave us some money to get food. Because of this, a police officer was sent to our home to check on us, and my dad got angry about me sharing family information to strangers. Another time, he forgot to pick up my sister from swim practice for an hour or so. My dad got a call from the swim place, and he told me to walk, 30-minute walk, and get my sister. As for feelings, I feel like my mind is a bit lighter, and my heart doesn't feel as heavy as before. It helped me process my emotions somewhat. Maybe you need to tell the school counselor what is going on regardless. I've debated about it, but at the end of the day, my sister and I still need our dad. He financially supports us, and we still live in his home. He has control over our college funds, so the last thing I want is to jeopardize that. Also, my sister is still young, and I know she still needs him even if he is emotionally unavailable. I don't want that to potentially be taken away from her. OP is voted not the a-hole. Update 2 days later. I've called my maternal grandpa when everyone was still sleeping. It ended up being a 2-hour call. I basically mentioned to him everything I've said here, and how I want to live with him if possible. He said that as much as he wants me to go get out from there, that he can't do much without my father's approval. I hinted at a legal approach, but he said he wouldn't be able to see us if it got that far. My grandpa also shared some new info regarding my dad. According to him, when I was 14 my sister was 10, my dad dropped us over at my grandpa's farm since he and Nicole were flying out. A day after they returned, my grandpa dropped us back home. We were still sleeping in Grandpa's car when this ordeal happened. But, when my grandpa knocked on the door, my dad answered the door drunk out of his mind. From what little he could see, my grandpa saw that the house was a mess. He told my dad that he would bring us back the following day once my dad was in his right mind. We left back to Grandpa's place. Then, my grandpa got a call from my dad the next morning, threatening him with the police if he didn't bring us back immediately. My grandpa mentioned that he would speak with my paternal grandparents to see if something can be done about our situation. Update 2 after 5 weeks. Hi everyone, it's been a while. I really want to thank all of you for your perspectives and advice. Just wanted to give an update. Regarding Thanksgiving dinner, when my dad and Nicole arrived, I asked if I could speak with them both. My dad said he didn't want to talk and went into the living room. Nicole still remained by the front door, so I apologized for insulting her. She replied that she needed to leave and went to the living room. Overall, she still seemed rightfully angry with me. Dinner was awkward because my grandma would try to get my dad and I to talk, but he wouldn't really bother. After dinner, I pulled him aside and apologized again. He ignored me and went straight to Nicole. I still wasn't sure if I was heading back with him or not, so I packed everything just in case. When he was getting ready to leave, I asked him if I could come back home. He said Nicole wasn't comfortable having me home even though it had been a few days since the incident. I spent the entire night crying on the phone with my sister. Therapy and living situation. After having my call with my maternal grandpa, he called my paternal grandparents a couple days later to discuss my situation. I overheard the call between them. My maternal grandpa expressed he was concerned about me, especially my mental state, and asked my paternal grandparents if they were willing to talk to my dad about putting me in therapy. My grandparents said they'd be willing to take me to their church's mental support group or talk with their faith leader who specializes in grief counseling. My grandpa pushed back on the idea and mentioned a need for more professional help, but they were not receptive to the idea. All three of them also had a heated conversation about my living arrangement. My grandpa said it was ridiculous for a grown man to throw out their daughter, and it was shameful that my paternal grandparents are not hard-pressed in helping me get back home. That's all I heard regarding the conversation. Now, my grandma started taking me to weekly private sessions with the faith leader. I'm not entirely happy with the arrangement, but it has helped me start to process my grief in a healthier way. Also, I am still living with my grandparents. I apologized over and over through text to my dad and through my grandparents, but he has not responded. My maternal grandpa has called my dad many times, but my dad blocked him. I am contemplating telling my school counselor next semester all the details regarding my dad and not omitting anything to protect him. I also wasn't invited to my dad and Nicole's Christmas dinner, which hurt, but I'm starting to not care to have a relationship with my dad. I don't know if my feelings will change. In a twisted way, it was good he didn't let me go back home with him. The space has helped me focus on myself. Relevant comments. Is your sister still in the house? I ran out of characters in the update, but my sister is still living with my dad. She visits me over weekends and I've walked home with her from school, so I still have some contact. Text him once more and say you're not sorry, have him sign away his parental rights and then go scorched earth. I've thought about this long and hard to the point it had mentally consumed me. I've imagined every revenge and final say moments, but one thing I've recognized in therapy is how much my resentment and anger has been holding me back from moving on. I am now just trying to emotionally detach from them. I have every intention to involve the school counselor for my sister. You've done the right thing. Thank you. I'm looking forward to college and putting this behind me in time. I'm trying to convince my grandparents to allow my sister to live with them full-time, so she has some semblance of peace. Has your father stopped leaving your sister alone for days at a time? He hasn't gone on any major trips since the end of November, but he definitely will for his California trip in January. I've asked my grandparents if they could let her stay over during then and honestly for the foreseeable future. OP responds to a comment with advice and questions here. I can't live with my maternal grandpa because I'm sure my dad wouldn't allow it. He has threatened to call the cops in the past when my sister and I stayed at my grandpa's place. Given how my grandpa and dad are not on speaking terms, I believe trying to live with him will only further prevent us from seeing him. Believe me, I never wanted to go to a faith leader for mental help. My paternal grandparents are hell-bent on not taking me to a valid professional. They don't believe in it and are worried what others might think of me if I do. I can drive myself, but I don't have my own car. I also don't want to lie to my grandparents about my whereabouts if I do take their truck. It's too big of a risk for me. I've lost a lot of love and respect I have for my father. I've stopped trying to communicate. I still end up crying some days, but it's becoming less frequent. The only reason I'll ever talk to him is if it's anything regarding my sister. Nicole is 34 years old, and my dad is 44 years old. I hope he is present for the baby. I have no expectations for him having regret or expressing remorse. My image of him pretty much died the moment he kicked me out. I already work at a local diner, so I'm hoping to save enough before summer at least. Also, I've gotten into 2 to 3 colleges as of RN. I'm excited for that chapter. Ty, for your advice. How OP is doing now, not enough for a full update. I ended up spending New Year's Eve with a couple of my friends and sister. A little silver lining in all of this IG. Also, Nicole's cooking kinda sucks, so missing Christmas wasn't that bad. I'm not religious, so I was skeptical of the faith-based approach in therapy. It's better than nothing, and the faith leader actually strays from religious-rooted reasons during sessions. OP's comment on Boro post 7 days later. Hi everyone, I'm feeling overwhelmed with the amount of messages, but I want to say that I am not literate regarding the laws around my situation. Regarding my sister and I's college fund, my mom worked in a small boutique, and some money earned through that was set aside. While my dad worked as a consultant, and I do know he did put some money into the funds too. I don't know if my sister and I received any money regarding benefits or any monetary inheritance from my mom after she passed. I'm still understanding a great deal of information, and writing everything out first. I even recently opened up a bank account with my grandparents' help, so now, I will not be dependent on him for simple monetary needs. I have thought about emancipation, but in less than a year, I'll be 18, so I am not sure if that avenue is worth my energy given everything else. Also, thank you for leaving info in the comments. I'll certainly be looking into all of that. Also, I know it is a small percentage of people, but please don't send me messages telling me to do violent things to my dad or Nicole or wishing harm on their baby. I don't need that, nor would I wish it upon anybody. More new comments. I believe my mom and dad contributed to a $529 plan for both my sister and I. I don't know how much is in it, or if he'll try to change the beneficiary to possibly the baby after. I am trying to figure that out since my mom contributed to it as well, if I can still be entitled to that money, or if I could get the money back if he tries to change the beneficiary. I don't know if this part is possible, but a possibility that I thought of. Faith leader says his behavior is a result of denial of the mourning process, and that his unhealthy coping mechanisms, example, constantly going out with Nicole, have manifested into his current actions. Also, he may be ignoring us because we remind him of mom or some BS like that. The leader puts heavy emphasis on family, so it's clear he's just finding roundabout ways to explain my dad's actions but doesn't acknowledge his wrongdoings. He at least acknowledges my feelings and discusses healthy coping mechanisms and how to manage grief. The faith leader never agreed or disagreed with any of my sentiments. Newest update post after 2 months from original post. Hi, I wasn't sure if I was still allowed to add long updates to my old post, but I wanted to give one. Right now, everything is a mess, so I'll try my best to be coherent. This in hindsight was an idiotic mistake on my end, but after I scheduled a meeting with my counselor, I mentioned it while calling my sister. On the call, I never explicitly mentioned my intention to report him, but she started freaking out and telling me it was not a good idea. She ended up crying on call saying that I would be hurting our father if I reported him. I told her that I wouldn't go to the meeting to help her calm down. Regardless, I still planned on going to the counselor meeting. I scheduled the meeting during the second week of January while my father was out in California. Night before the meeting, I got a call from my father. He said that if I ever wanted a place to live again to not spread lies about him to the counselor. I said that I would never do that, and that was the end of the call. This was the first time I've spoken to him in days, and I never gave any indication of me reporting him. I realized my sister must have said something, so I called her to talk. I asked her why she would tell him something like this, and she said that he called her to ask what I was doing. She slipped up and told him that I was planning to meet with the counselor. I still ended up going to the counselor meeting, and I told him everything that was going on. I told the counselor to please not notify my father about the meeting, and he agreed. At the very end, the counselor gave me 2 to 3 pamphlets for mental health support, and said he'll follow up with me. He also dodged my questions regarding what will happen now. A day later, right after I got home from school, my paternal grandpa called me over and said he wanted to talk. He told me that the school called my father to set up a meeting with the counselor. He started to yell and get angry with me saying that, if I pull this shit, they'll take my sister and the baby away. He also said that I wasn't raised to lie and continued to reprimand me. I never thought my grandpa was capable of being this way, but it scared me how angry he got. I also got grounded, so I'm not allowed to drive or visit friends for a couple of weeks. I don't know what exactly went down in the meeting between the counselor and my father. From the call between my grandpa and father, I learned there was a police officer present in the meeting and that they will be doing a wellness check. Also, my father denied everything that I told the counselor and chalked it up to me being spiteful because I lost my mom. I wasn't in a good mental state afterwards, and I am still not. I call my friend and ask her to stay on the phone with me most times, or I just rot in my room. Also, as punishment, my grandma stopped taking me to the faith leader, so that's my current situation.